Something is happening inside modern marriages that the mainstream conversation about relationships is almost completely unwilling to address honestly. The divorce rate is not a secret. The data on who initiates those divorces is not a secret either. Study after study consistently shows that women initiate somewhere between 65 and 70% of all divorces in the United States. In college-educated couples, that number climbs even higher. These are not contested figures. They are not cherry-picked from fringe research. They are the consistent finding of decades of sociological data. And yet the dominant cultural narrative around why marriages fail almost never starts there. It starts with men, with their emotional unavailability, their failure to communicate, their inability to evolve, their refusal to meet the needs of modern women. And while male behavior is absolutely a legitimate subject for examination in the context of marriage, the near total absence of honest scrutiny of female behavior in failing marriages is not just intellectually dishonest. It is actively harmful to the women it claims to protect, because it is leaving them without the one thing that could actually change their outcomes: an accurate understanding of what they are doing and what it is costing them. My name is Miss Anna, and today we are talking about why modern women are ruining their own marriages at an alarming rate. Not because they are bad people, not because they do not love their husbands, but because they have absorbed a set of ideas about marriage, about entitlement, about effort, and about what they owe the person they chose that is fundamentally incompatible with building a partnership that lasts. Let's start with the most significant shift in how modern women approach marriage. Because the problem does not begin after the wedding, it begins in the years leading up to it, in the way women are taught to think about what marriage is for and what it requires of them. For most of human history, marriage was understood as a partnership, a structure built by two people who were both required to contribute, to sacrifice, to prioritize the health of the unit above individual comfort on a regular basis. Neither person entered it primarily as a consumer of experiences and feelings. Both entered it as builders of something shared. That understanding has been almost completely replaced in modern Western culture with something that functions much more like a consumer relationship. A marriage is now evaluated primarily on whether it is making her happy, whether her needs are being met, whether she is fulfilled, whether the relationship is serving her growth and her identity and her vision for her life. And the moment it stops doing those things reliably, the conclusion that is reached is not that the marriage needs work. It is that the marriage has failed, that she deserves better. That leaving is not just an option, but an act of self-respect. That shift in orientation from builder to consumer is at the root of most of what I am going to describe today. Because a woman who enters and maintains a marriage primarily as a consumer of its emotional output is going to make a very different set of daily decisions than a woman who understands herself as a co-architect of something that requires her consistent investment to survive. The first way modern women are destroying their marriages is through the weaponization of emotional needs. And I want to be precise about what I mean here, because emotional needs in a marriage are legitimate and important. Both people have them, and both people deserve to have them acknowledged and addressed. The problem is not having emotional needs. The problem is the way those needs have been elevated in modern relationship culture to the status of absolute demands that override almost every other consideration in the marriage. The framework that has become dominant says that her emotional experience is always valid, always primary, and always his responsibility to manage. That his job in the marriage is essentially to be a continuous and reliable source of emotional regulation for her, and that any failure to perform that function adequately is a betrayal of his obligations as a husband. What this produces in practice is a marriage in which his emotional needs, his need for respect, his need for peace, his need for a partner who is sometimes simply pleasant to be around, are consistently subordinated to the management of hers. He spends enormous energy trying to anticipate, navigate, and resolve her emotional states. He walks on eggshells. He apologizes for things he is not sure he did wrong. He absorbs her moods without complaint. because complaining about them has been framed as unsupportive. And over time, he does not become a better emotional partner. He becomes an exhausted one. A man who has learned that the marriage is primarily a place where his emotional resources get consumed rather than replenished. And men who learn that eventually stop showing up fully, not dramatically, just gradually, the way a fire dies when nobody adds wood. The second way modern women are destroying their marriages is through the chronic outsourcing of accountability. One of the most consistent features of the modern cultural framework around relationships is the near total insulation of women from honest examination of their own behavior in failing partnerships. When a marriage is struggling, the diagnosis almost always locates the problem in him. He is not emotionally available enough. He is not communicating enough. He has not done enough work on himself. He is not meeting her where she is. The possibility that her behavior, her critical tone, her emotional volatility, her withdrawal of physical affection, her consistent prioritization of everything and everyone above the marriage might be contributing significantly to the problems she is experiencing is almost never seriously entertained. And because it is never entertained, it is never addressed. And because it is never addressed, the behavior continues, and the marriage continues to deteriorate, and the conclusion that is eventually reached is that he failed her, when the more accurate conclusion, in many cases, is that she failed the marriage and was never given the cultural permission or the personal framework to see it. The third way modern women are destroying their marriages is through the gradual withdrawal of the behaviors that produce the attraction and commitment that built the marriage in the first place. This is one of the most predictable and most damaging patterns in long-term relationships, and it is almost never discussed honestly. In the early stages of a relationship, most women invest significantly in being appealing to the man they want. They are warm, they are physically attentive. They are interested in his life and his thoughts. They make an effort with their appearance. They are fun to be around. They are the kind of person he wants to spend time with. And he commits. He builds a life with her. He invests his future in her. And then, gradually, the effort withdraws. Not all at once, but steadily, the warmth cools. The physical attentiveness diminishes. The interest in his inner life fades. The effort with her appearance reduces. The fun becomes friction. And the man who committed to the woman who made that effort is now living with a different person who is operating on the assumption that his commitment is now unconditional and permanent, regardless of whether the conditions that produced it still exist. This is not a minor adjustment. It is a fundamental breach of the implicit agreement of the relationship. He did not commit to the lowest effort version of her. He committed to someone who showed up with genuine investment. And the withdrawal of that investment, slow as it is experienced by him as a kind of bait and switch that he often lacks the language to articulate but feels profoundly at the level of his daily experience of the marriage. The fourth way modern women are destroying their marriages is through the adoption of a scorekeeping mentality that makes genuine partnership almost impossible. Modern relationship culture has produced a framework in which contributions to the marriage are tracked, compared, and evaluated with an almost forensic intensity. Who did more housework this week? Who sacrificed more for the children? Who gave up more career opportunity? Who has been carrying more emotional labor? And this framework, whatever its origins, produces a marriage that functions less like a partnership between two people who are genuinely on the same team, and more like a negotiation between two people who are fundamentally in competition. Every contribution becomes a chip. Every sacrifice becomes a debt. Every moment of effort becomes leverage. And the marriage, which requires a basic orientation of generosity to survive, becomes a transaction in which both people are primarily focused on whether the ledger is balanced in their favor. The tragedy of the scorekeeping marriage is that it is self-defeating even on its own terms. Because the husband who feels that his contributions are being constantly monitored and found insufficient does not respond by contributing more. He responds by disengaging, by doing the minimum required to avoid conflict. By withdrawing the discretionary effort, the extra mile, the unrequested gesture of care that makes a marriage feel like more than a functional arrangement. And then she adds his disengagement to the ledger as further evidence of imbalance. And the cycle tightens. The fifth way modern women are destroying their marriages is perhaps the most uncomfortable to name. It is the influence of external voices over the voice of the marriage itself. Modern women have access to an unprecedented volume of input about their relationships from sources that have absolutely no stake in those relationships surviving. Friends who are themselves in failing or failed relationships. Social media content that is algorithmically optimized to produce outrage and validation rather than wisdom. Therapy frameworks that are built around individual fulfillment rather than relational health. Cultural narratives that treat the decision to leave a marriage as inherently brave and the decision to work on one as inherently suspicious. All of this input flows constantly into the space where a woman's own judgment about her marriage should be operating, and it drowns it out. She stops evaluating her marriage based on what she actually experiences and what she actually values, and what she actually knows about the man she chose. She starts evaluating it against a constantly shifting external standard that is almost always going to find it lacking. Because the external standard is not designed to help her marriage succeed. It is designed to generate engagement and sell the idea that she deserves more. The women who are keeping their marriages intact are not doing so because they got lucky with exceptional husbands. In many cases, they are married to ordinary men with ordinary limitations. They are doing so because they have retained enough independence of judgment to evaluate their marriages on their own terms. To distinguish between a marriage that is genuinely broken and a marriage that is simply difficult in the ways that all long-term partnerships are difficult. To understand that the gap between what they have and what the external narrative tells them they deserve is not evidence of failure. It is just the gap between reality and fantasy that every adult eventually has to negotiate. Now, I want to say directly to the women watching this, I am not telling you that your needs do not matter. I am not telling you that you should stay in genuinely harmful situations. I am not telling you that men bear no responsibility for the marriages that fail. They do, significantly, and those conversations matter and deserve to happen. But they are already happening constantly everywhere you look. This conversation, the one about what women are contributing to the failure of their own marriages, is the one that is not happening, and its absence is not protecting women. It is leaving them without the self-knowledge they need to make different choices, to build something that actually lasts, to stop arriving at the end of marriages they genuinely wanted and genuinely invested in, and having no framework for understanding their own role in how they got there. The women who understand what I have described today are not less empowered for understanding it. They are more because they are operating with an accurate picture of what a lasting marriage actually requires. Not a perfect husband, not a relationship without difficulty, not a partnership that produces constant fulfillment without consistent investment. A real partnership with two people who are both genuinely trying, both genuinely invested, both willing to prioritize the health of the thing they built over the comfort of their individual grievances on any given day. That marriage is available to most women who want it, but it requires something that modern culture has made increasingly difficult to access. The honest acknowledgement that she is not just a recipient of the marriage's quality, she is one of its primary architects. And what she builds with that role depends entirely on whether she is willing to take it seriously. That is it for today. Let me know in the comments what your honest reaction to this is. Whether you agree, whether you push back, whether this landed in a way you did not expect, I want to hear it. If you made it this far, go ahead and subscribe because there is a lot more of this coming. My name is Miss Anna, and I will see you in the next one.